went public with the reasoning why he fired CM Punk. The reasoning being is that he felt that his life was in danger and that other people were in danger for CM Punk's conduct. Um, this has been a very, very, very bizarre circumstance. And we're going to play the audio from Collision. Now, this is not going to be a Collision review because I have not seen Collision. I was like a normal person watching Payback, and then that ended at 11 o'clock, and I recorded a video and I went to bed. So I don't have to do an entire review on Collision. I may do that at some other point in time, but not right now. Okay. So we're going to listen to the audio. You're going to listen to the Collision version, and we're going to see how that turns in. Hopefully, I can get this thing to work, and we can get the Collision version of the problem, of the issue here. And from there, we will hopefully. Oh, what is going on? All right, I'm trying to get the. I'm gonna boot up the audio in a second, but we're gonna listen to Tony Khan explain himself, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about the scenario surrounding this. Okay, I got the audio. So here's the audio from Collision. We're not gonna listen to the whole thing straight. We're gonna, do a piece by piece because I don't want him to get DMCA us or anything like that. So this is the audio from AEW Collision without the crowd reaction because I've seen the video of him talking about it in person, and we're going to talk about that too. So here's the Collision version. Oh, I just clicked the button.
Today I had to make one of the toughest decisions of my professional career. Today I terminated Phil Brooks, CM Punk, for cause. This stems from a backstage incident at AEW All In last Sunday. The incident was regrettable and it endangered people backstage. That includes the production staff, the people who help put the show on every week, innocent people who had nothing to do with it.
All right, so CM Punk was throwing grenades backstage, apparently. He was swinging around a halberd and put everybody in danger. I mean, CM Punk clearly was, he must have had access to a lethal weapon. How was people's lives in danger? Who was in danger? That's what I want to know. Like, how were they in danger? That's such a gigantic red flag. How was people in danger? By doing what? He started a fight. All right. Now, again, unless guns were drawn, and Cash Wheeler was there on his Steven Seagal tip, and it turned into a scene out of Equilibrium, who was in danger? Who from the production staff was in danger? That's what I want to know. I need specifics. I need to know specifically what CM Punk did that was a danger to everybody else. So let's now Timu says that maybe the monitors fell onto Tony, which I have heard. I heard that in the Rumble things were falling, cameras, monitors, or whatever. Entirely possible that was the case, but I wouldn't say that everybody's lives were in danger, and I was concerned about the production staff and all this kind of stuff. I wouldn't put it in such dramatic terms. There was also a lot of talk that CM Punk lunged at Tony Khan, which I completely and totally waved off because it doesn't sound realistic. But of course, now the Wrestling Observer newsletter, and we're going to get through, other people's responses. We'll probably do that, tomorrow, Monday on Labor Day. We'll probably go through what Wrestling Observer has to say about it and various other people who are talking about it. But we're going to stick strictly to Tony Khan here. So if a monitor, let's say, is on like some kind of scaffolding or something and it tipped over, that's not exactly life-threatening. You might get a concussion. You might get seriously injured if the things are knocked over. But I don't see that being as something that, where you're talking about how your life was in danger. I don't necessarily see that being the case. The monitors shouldn't be up that high anyway. The monitors should be eye level. They should be sitting down watching the monitors on screen. If you knock the monitors over, yeah, they may fall into your lap, hit you in the chest, or maybe even dot you in the chin. But I don't think your life was in danger. You know, did CM Punk threaten Tony Khan? Did he threaten the production staff? If that was the case, and let's say before we even continue this, if you felt like your life was in danger, if you felt threatened, then there's two things we should know for sure. One, CM Punk should never have come out through that curtain and performed that All In. You should have told him straight up, get the out of here right now. You should have fired him on the spot. So that leads to the second thing is, what did you need the disciplinary committee for? If everybody's life was in danger, then what did you need the disciplinary committee for? You don't know when your life is in danger. You don't know to fire a guy when your life is in danger. I would have fired him on the spot if I felt like he was really a threat. If I thought he was a threat to my staff and a threat to myself, I would have fired him on the spot. I don't need a disciplinary committee. What do we need this whole week for? What do we need this week of investigation for if your life was in danger? Come on, man. I'm struggling with this one, dog. I really am. Like, this doesn't make sense. It really don't make sense. Let's continue.
I've been going to wrestling shows for over 30 years. I've been producing them on this network for nearly 4 years. Never in all that time have I ever felt, until last Sunday, that my security, my safety, my life was in danger at a wrestling show. I don't think anybody should feel that way at work. I don't think the people I work with should feel that way. And I had to make a very difficult choice today. It came at the recommendation of a discipline committee here in AEW, as well as outside legal counsel, who delivered a unanimous recommendation. And I have followed up on that recommendation. I'm sorry to any fans who are upset by this. I'm sorry to anyone who's upset by this. Despite that, we're going to have a great...
Yeah, we don't need to hear about that. We don't want to hear you try to shield all out. All right. So we went through the trouble of, he's basically saying CM Punk created an unsafe working environment. That's what he's saying. Which, we have been saying, various talking heads on the YouTube and the Twitter space. We've been saying that for a while, that if you're going to, if this guy's creating fights and he's constantly in the middle of something, yeah, it's an unsafe working environment. You can't have that. That's a fact. That part of his comments, I have no doubt is likely true, that there's people backstage who feel like it was an unsafe working environment because CM Punk was there. He was hostile, he was irritable, and he's a jerk. We don't like him. So we're going to say he's got to go. I understand. You could have just said that he made an unsafe working environment for certain talent, and, people didn't feel comfortable around him. It was for the betterment of everybody that there was a divorce. There was some kind of separation. But to say that I never felt like my life was in danger until Sunday, it's like you sat there for 5 more hours, bro. And then you did a scrum afterwards where you said there was an investigation. I'm sorry. I've never been involved with anything where my life was legitimately in danger and I had to question it, for a week. What could I do about this? What do you mean? What can you do about this? We had to talk to a disciplinary committee. For what? For what? If you felt like your life was in danger, for what? What did you need the disciplinary committee for? What did you need to talk to outside counsel for? I don't know. This doesn't make sense. Now, firing CM Punk was the right decision. For the betterment of your company, you cut off one of the fingers to save the hand. I understand it. Maybe the hand is already corrupt. Maybe the finger is actually, the best part of it, and you try to save that one finger because the rest of your hand is gangrened. I don't know. Depending on whether you're a pro elite or pro Punk, that's up to you. I look at it as like a heel program. I don't like nobody involved. But it's clear that CM Punk was the one piece that was not wanted by a lot of the talent, especially the EVPs. and that the only person who had his back was Tony, you know, and maybe David Zaslav, maybe. And once he had burned his bridge with Tony, and this was likely at All In, that was the end of it. You know, there's nothing more you can do when Tony doesn't want to do anything with you anymore. Now, Tony is a mark. You know, he's, you know, we talked about extensively how he sat back and gave CM Punk a ton of credit for the success of AEW, especially in 2022. And, you know, for a large part, and he was gone for most of 2023 so far, but he gave CM Punk a lot of credit for the success of some pay-per-views and a lot of attendance and stuff like this. He didn't want to do this. And you can look at his facial expressions, especially in the live version of this very same speech. Like, he prepared this. This is the pre-packaged version where he's staring at the camera bug-eyed. When you look at him sitting on the stage and he's got his eyes closed as people are booing him, you can look and see that he didn't want to do this, right? He was pushed to this point. But the addition of he never felt like his life was in danger until now, that is absolute, that is so dramatic. I'm sorry, bro, that is so dramatic. I just can't envision a situation in which Tony Khan's life was literally in danger. Now, to dabble just a little bit over into Dave Meltzer, I've seen a couple of tweets from people who listen to his show that claim that it was more than a lunge, that he didn't just lunge at Tony. There was something more than that. Okay, if he put his hands on Tony, let's say, you still don't need a disciplinary committee. He should have been fired. He should have been fired. If he put his hands on Tony, if he threatened Tony, he should have been fired. That moment, he should have been fired. So to me, it doesn't seem like we needed a disciplinary committee to make a decision if people's lives and careers were at risk. It didn't seem like that was needed. Now, a lot of people want to give Tony credit for firing CM Punk publicly, and I give him credit for that too, from Paul Heyman. In 1995, Paul Heyman had to fire Sabu, and he fired Sabu publicly. He went out in front of the crowd before the show and told them that Sabu was no-showing the event because he was double booked in Japan, and Paul fired Sabu publicly. This is what Tony is doing. He's trying to get out in front of it. He knows there's going to be 100 questions about it, so he's going to jump out in front of this. He's going to put out there, hey, we fired CM Punk. He let that sit in for a little while. People are going to question why. What did he do? Why did you come up with this decision? Then right before Collision, in fact, on Collision, I don't know if this was the beginning of the show, middle of the show, end of the show, I don't know. But he definitely made a comment before the show as he was sitting in the chair on the stage that, you know, he felt like, you know, his life was in danger and the production staff was in danger and all this kind of stuff. Okay, that's all he learned from Paul. The difference being is Tony is not Paul. You know, Tony is a very small man. He's petite. He looks fearful. He was there shaking like a tiny dog on that stage as people were yelling at him, calling him a pussy. And when he said, I never felt like my life was in danger, the place just rained boos. It was like, boo. Because they were like, I think they, like me, was questioning, like, how was your life in danger? You know, you was worried about your life. Like, what do you mean? And it's just such a ridiculous conception to think that CM Punk would have attacked Tony Khan. Like, at most, he would have started a fight in Gorilla that would have knocked over some monitors, and maybe they fell onto Tony's lap or whatever. But that still wouldn't have made him feel like his life was in danger. I just don't get it. I don't get it. But he made the right decision. You know, he made the right decision. I was about to talk about this in this video too, WG Phil, that apparently, this is from House of Wrestling. I'm not going to read the article. I'm just going to summarize it. There's supposed to be a summit of sorts between the Elite, CM Punk, etc., in the days leading up to All In. And at this summit, they were supposed to sit down and hash things out, finally. But a couple of maybe, I don't know, maybe a day or two before, the Elite canceled it. They decided they didn't want to participate. And this is, from House of Wrestling's perspective, this led to CM Punk being very frustrated because he's been trying to talk to the Elite, trying to apologize to them, trying to bury the hatchet. These guys have been carrying the torch of this thing the entire time. And he was never going to get an opportunity to apologize to them and to make things right and try to work with them. And any attempt was shut down. And this seemed to be like the final straw. They had actually agreed to do it and then backed out of it, apparently. And I don't know how much of that is true. Maybe it was Tony's intention to get everybody together and it just never happened. But I can see how that could be frustrating. I can see why that would piss me off. If we are going to agree to sit down, hash this thing out, and then get over it, but you decide maybe a couple of hours before or whatever that you're not going to do it. You just decided against it for no real reason other than our feelings are still hurt. And then Tony is sitting back like, well, they don't want to talk. They don't want to do anything. And then you're sitting here, the guy who's getting booed, the guy who's getting attacked online, the guy who's being shit talked. I would be upset too. And then the whole traveling thing, with him having to find his own way to the arena. I understand that he might have been frustrated. I understand. And I do think that separation was inevitable. I'm not one of these people who thought that I thought this idea may last longer than it actually did, but I didn't envision them getting into it the first pay-per-view that they had to work together. I thought it would take maybe 2 pay-per-views and then they would get into it. I thought maybe, okay, they'll get through All In because everybody would be very excited. It's a very important show. It's like starting shit WrestleMania weekend. Why would you want to do that? They're not going to do that. They're not that stupid. And then All Out is in Chicago. So CM Punk is going to be like, okay, he's going to be basically at home. Everything's cool. But then maybe they'll get out to Las Vegas or something like that. And then shit would jump off. I didn't envision them getting into it in London. I didn't think it was going to be that soon. But I don't think anyone realized that this whole, 2-state solution that Tony came up with was going to work for very long. I was just surprised that it boiled over as quickly as it did. It seems to me that Tony Khan, I think JS mentions it here, is Tony Khan treats wrestlers like toys. I don't know if that's true. I think that he looks at them as his friends, with the big hugs and all this stuff, the kind of how he flatters them and he puts them over. I think he looks at some of these wrestlers as they are his friends. He's invited to Sammy Guevara's wedding. He dresses up like Orange Cassidy for Halloween and this kind of stuff. He looks at these guys like they're his friends, and he's deeply appreciative of them and maybe a little too appreciative. Maybe there needs to be more of a barrier there so that he realizes that these are not his friends, that these are business acquaintances. This is a business arrangement. And these guys are not going to stick with you through thick and thin forevermore. But I think because he looks at these guys as his friends, he looked at this situation with CM Punk as, my friends are fighting. My friends don't get along. How could I be friends with these guys and friends with this guy at the same time? Instead of looking at it in terms of business, he was looking at it in terms of how can we all maintain our friendship at the same time, And I don't know if he has enough experience with doing stuff like that in order to make this happen. Because typically, if you have friends that don't get along, you don't, bring them together. In any situation where they might be together, they are far apart, And in this situation, he probably should have did that in London. Instead of CM Punk being in Gorilla, which doesn't seem to make sense if he's just a wrestler, which we found out later that he wasn't. He had an employment contract too. So, yeah, he had a wrestler contract and an employment contract, which means that he was, because you're a wrestler, you're an independent contractor. You're not an employee. He had an employment contract. So that tells you that there was something else going on there, which we all suggested. But to get back on topic, Tony getting in front of this is a way of him saying, I said everything I needed to say when the scrum happens. After All Out, he's going to be subject to questions about CM Punk. And he's going to say, I already made a comment about it. Let's move on, which is smart. It's smart. He got in front of it. It's smart. Now, furthermore, apparently security were taking CM Punk signs away from the fans. And this was another thing that apparently was happening. I don't know if it was happening while Tony was on stage or after Tony left or maybe before Tony got there. Maybe it was an edict that Tony or AEW sent out before Collision that if you see any CM Punk crowd signs, you take them. But apparently they were taking the signs too, and this pissed off a lot of the fans as they brought signs, some pro CM Punk, some after. Some anti, I should say. And they were taking the signs. They don't want to talk about him. They don't want to feature him. They want to ignore this, get out in front of it, say what they got to say. Tony gets the heat. Everybody else just gets to celebrate. And then that's it. Furthermore, apparently, I don't know because I haven't seen the show yet, that the Young Bucks popped up on Collision. I know this because there are a lot of pro CM Punk fans that were very upset that somebody like Matt Hardy, I think they said Matt Hardy was talking about it on his Twitter account. I checked it. There was a lot of vague references to CM Punk. There was a lot of vague references to him being happy the Young Bucks were on Collision. I don't know what they did, so we'll talk about it, I guess. Matter of fact, I just wrote the Collision review into with All Out, and we'll do it there. I don't know what the big deal is, but it sounds like once CM Punk was officially gone, the entire company became anti-CM Punk. We're taking his crowd signs now. It's okay to tweet vaguely about him now, and that's just going to be that. And it's very weird, Timu was correct. A lot of fans have complained that WWE takes people's signs away, and that's very how tyrannical, you're killing their freedom of speech and all this sort of stuff. But now AEW's doing it. They're taking the CM Punk signs away. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or not. It's certainly a distraction to have people continuously bring in signs. You also don't want fans, you don't want to seem like you're taking sides if you let people bring anti-CM Punk signs, but you can't bring pro CM Punk signs. So the best way to do it is just say no CM Punk signs, and you just wash your hands of both of them. That's probably the best way to do it. But WWE taking signs, or I think there was a thing yesterday where they showed a clip of Bayley turning heel, and they cropped Sasha Banks out of it. And then people were like, oh my God, look at what WWE's doing. And it's like, well, wasn't it a couple of months ago where they took CM Punk's face, or they covered his face on a van or something like that? Like people do this stuff. They don't want to promote people who don't work there, or people who are they view as in being the negative right now. They don't want to do that. And this is the best thing that AEW could do. Do I support banning signs? Typically, no. I think you should let fans do what they do. At the same time, though, you're already going to get CM Punk chants. They're going to get destroyed in Chicago for All Out. There's going to be tons of CM Punk chants. It may be CM Punk chants forevermore in AEW. I'm a worried they're gonna pop back up in WWE, especially as they near Survivor Series in Chicago. That there may be very loud, vociferous CM Punk chants as the people want him to return. Uh, I'm deeply concerned about that. But Tony Khan made the right decision firing CM Punk. He probably should have fired him last year. That's number one. Two, I like that he, made the comment public, both in Collision and in person. It's the exact same comment. He didn't make a different comment. It's, his prepackaged comment. I don't like how he looked. How he looked like he was, very small, like a little boy sitting in that chair, and he almost seemed almost scared of the fan reaction. He was very apologetic. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't. This had to be done. I'm so sorry if we offended people and we're upset. People are upset with me. He wants to be liked, and this is a guy who came into this space with a lot of positivity. But over the years, he had to make decisions that people don't like. This is part of being in the business. Now they're looking at him as the evil Mr. Khan, who took CM Punk away from them. And they're not taking into account that CM Punk partially did this to himself with his attitude, his irritability, and his ego, and all this kind of stuff. Part of it, you can blame the Elite for their manipulations, their lying, their whisper network, and all this kind of stuff. You can do that. But it's unfair to everyone else who works there if CM Punk is constantly causing drama. It is unfair. And yeah, there's going to be a lot of negative reaction about this. But the negative reaction will indeed eventually blow over. It took longer for WWE because CM Punk wasn't active. And people saw it as WWE is the big bad bully and they were screwing over CM Punk. In this situation, there's enough negativity in the media for AEW to have a somewhat soft landing in firing CM Punk. Everybody's going to look and say, well, he's beating up guys backstage. He's banning people from the shows. He's doing all this stuff. He's yada, yada, yada. It's okay for them to fire him. And they're not going to have, I think, the same exact reaction. You're probably still going to get some CM Punk chants for sure, especially during something that sucks. There's probably going to be a CM Punk chant. But I don't think it'd be the same as WWE. All right, Kevin Abreu says, I really want to see Tony Khan says yesterday, CM Punk, screw CM Punk. A lot of people are saying that, a lot of people are saying that CM Punk screwed himself. Ultimately, of course, you're responsible for your own actions and your own behaviors. Yes, he is responsible for himself. He is responsible for screwing himself, and there's no doubt about that. But Tony Khan did the best he could, I think. A guy who is as big a mark for talent as Tony Khan having to finally make the decision, you get the idea, you feel that he really didn't have much of a choice. You get the idea that he didn't have much of a choice. JS says, Punk being an employee makes sense that he was fired and nothing seemingly happened to Jungle Boy. Jungle Boy will get booed whenever he shows up in Chicago. I think he's going to get booed wherever he goes anyway, because there's going to be the belief that he's been shielded by his affiliation with the Elite. And this is partly true, of course, that his affiliation with the Elite is why he got into it with CM Punk in the first place. And the fact that he goaded CM Punk into attacking him is going to be viewed negatively. But see, ultimately, if you take the bait, you still have to take the consequences for it. JS says, it's the same fans that dig through a wrestler's Twitter that don't like to find something, but are quiet about their problematic faves. Maybe. Big Armada says, that's one thing I respect about Vince McMahon. He doesn't apologize for making harsh decisions. Yeah, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. People don't like when Vince comes on and says he fired the Ultimate Warrior for holding them up for money or whatever the case may be. And they'll say, well, he had all this time in the world and he even paid them and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, well, when you take these shows so far in advance and you sold tickets, based on the Ultimate Warrior being there, you want to get the match in the ring. That's what Vince, in Vince's mind, it's not like he, 5 minutes before the show, that's 2 months away. If you tell somebody 2 months before then you're not going to be there, then you've already dumped a ton of marketing money into the show. People are going to be like, what do you mean? You're holding me up for money. You're not going to show up here. But he has made tough decisions routinely, and people don't like those tough decisions, but he makes them and he moves on. I think the Bret Hart decision is probably the one thing that he still gets a lot of heat about because it was public, it was a double cross, and then he went on television unabashedly and said Bret screwed Bret. Bret did this to Bret. He didn't take any responsibility for it. He looked at it as I told Bret to do something. Bret didn't want to do it. I did what I had to do. End of story. The same thing with Sasha Banks and Naomi. This was last year actually. They were told to do something. They refused to do it. WWE went public and said, look, these girls basically walked out on the fans. They walked out on the audience, which it doesn't matter what you think. That's what happened. They were scheduled to appear. They did not appear. So they walked out. And you could try to twist it and turn it and say, oh, it was a reason. No, they walked out. They could have did whatever they had to do and then left and then decided we're not going to show up to the next show. But they were scheduled to appear. They were advertised. They didn't show up. There's nothing you can do about that. The company trying to get in front of it, I think, is smart, but it begs more questions. It's just going to beg more questions. Rachel Buck, CM Punk is just like Ryback. They just like each other because they both have anger problems. And Ryback is just like CM Punk. I don't know. I won't say that. I wouldn't go that far. Wrestling Soup. What's up? I love this show. CM Punk chants forever in Chicago. I wouldn't be surprised if they just stopped running Chicago. I think they'll avoid it for a while. It seems like they were running Chicago more than usual because CM Punk was on the roster and it was a surefire sellout. The question that we have now is, where are they going to run? Because if you can't run Chicago every month, which is what they usually do, and they're going to run Las Vegas every month, it's going to be a very interesting time because they burned the Chicago market. They burned the New York market. Las Vegas, West Coast, I don't know. It's like, unless you're going to run, London pretty regularly, I don't know what you're going to do at this point. But they made themselves a lightning rod, for negativity at this point. They can just hope that they put out so much negative stuff that it becomes a soft pillow for them to land on, that they had to, that Punk was dangerous. And I don't know, you made them sound cooler, actually. You made them sound cool. Like, everybody felt we were all threatened. Godzilla was in there kicking over buildings. It was like, what's that rap video where Snoop Dogg kicked over the Twin Towers? New York, New York, big city of dreams. And CM Punk is over there kicking over the monitors. You are who got a problem with me? Like, come on. T. Lewis says, I heard Punk was throwing and kicking stuff. I don't know what's true or what is. I don't think so. I don't think he was overreacting like that. It seems very bizarre that he would start throwing monitors and kick, because Jungle Boy mocked him a little bit in a promo. All of a sudden, he started smashing stuff. Like, who is he? What was that coach from Indiana? Like, he's gonna start just smacking people and throwing stuff. Like, I don't know. I can see him maybe saying, wanting to confront Jungle Boy because Jungle Boy is being a smartass. But in terms of breathing fire towards everybody else, I don't necessarily see that. But I wasn't there, so I don't. Again, he could have told Cash Wheeler to go get the gat. We don't know. But I don't think that occurred. It doesn't seem like that would have occurred. It doesn't seem like if he had behaved that negatively that they would have let him perform. It just doesn't make sense to me that the guy you felt was threatening the lives of yourself and your staff and your production team, it took you a week to fire him. I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that. That doesn't make sense to me. That doesn't make sense. It wouldn't take you a week to figure it out. All right. It wouldn't take you a week. So, unless, and I guess if he has some kind of employment contract, and maybe there was some very specific language in there I even heard some people saying that he wanted to get fired. It's like, why would he want to get fired when he can just quit? That doesn't make sense to me either. So I'm thinking that he has some kind of very specific language in his employment contract that he can only be fired for cause. And that's why they keep saying he's fired for cause. And saying that he created an unsafe working environment is technically true. Bobby Knight, that's exactly what I was thinking of. I don't think he was just absolutely just destroying property, and I can see the skirmish knocking some people over, knocking some things over, because when people get into fights, it could go anywhere, and people do get caught up in the middle of fights. And you get into a fight in guerrilla, there's a cubby hole where there's a bunch of people, and maybe you knocked over the tables or whatever. But if you legitimately felt your life was in danger, you shouldn't have let the talent go out there and perform. That's stupid. That's dumb. If CM Punk attacked Tony Khan, that's dumb. Mo the Killer, have you seen Grayson Waller tweet after Payback? I did. A very cheeky Grayson Waller tweet where he said Jey Uso attacked him on his own show, fire this man, and he had a Pepsi to his chin, which very cheeky. Very cheeky and vague way of of doing that. Well done on his behalf, because he's making fun of the situation, but it's still enough deniability. But it was a Pepsi to his chin. I saw that. That was very sweet. Timu, AEW suffering from CM Punk chances as things poetically coming full circle. CM Punk was the main originator of the smart validation movement that ultimately created the soil for AEW to grow from. That is absolutely true. This is God bringing the flood. That's exactly what happened, man. I created it. I'm going to try to destroy it. And that's what Cody was talking about on I think one of his last promos before he left AEW. Everything that CM Punk said he was going to do, Cody and the Young Bucks and all of those guys actually did. And this is why I don't think CM Punk's going to WWE. Cody and all of these guys were a little too casual in how they went about roundabout vaguely talking about CM Punk, and Cody taking that one shot at CM Punk before he left. And then in WWE smiling like a Cheshire cat, like, I don't have anything to do with anybody. I don't have any problems with anyone. I love everybody. It's like, you're full of shit. We all see that you're full of shit. But this is true. If it wasn't for CM Punk's pipe bomb promo, none of this would have actually occurred. A lot of this is because of the CM Punk quote unquote revolution. But it's typical of revolutions that the revolutionaries eventually become the status quo and they start causing problems. I don't know if you guys know that much about history, but that's typically how it works. Castro gets power in Cuba, revolution and all this kind of stuff. But as soon as you get power, you become the status quo, and now you have to quell all the counter-revolutionaries. CM Punk gets a little bit of authority in AEW. Everybody who wants to do whatever they want to do on the show has to go through CM Punk, and he doesn't have that DIY punk rock idea anymore. He's a little bit older. He's a little bit saltier. He's building a show now. And he starts telling people you can't do that. The kind of shit that he hated when he was just a regular roster guy, being told how he had to dress, how he had to talk, who he could work with, all this kind of stuff. He started doing that to everybody else. The revolution does two things. One, it turns the revolutionary into a tyrant, which is almost inevitable. And two, it starts to eat its own young. So CM Punk starts to see all of these people who are inspired by him, the Kenny Omegas and the Young Bucks and the Darby Allins and all these guys. He starts to affect them in a certain way. He rubbed the Young Bucks in their camp the wrong way. Moxley, who I think Moxley and Punk were two guys who should have been, two peas of a pod. They couldn't get along. And I thought to myself, like, man, that was crazy. And the whole time they were having their issue, I was thinking to myself, like, these are two guys who hated WWE for the exact same reasons. The exact same reasons. You would think that they would have been hugging each other in AEW, like, oh my God, can you believe we survived that nonsense over there? But it turns out that that's not true. They're so alike that they got into it. And it's very, very strange stuff that they got going on over there, man. It's very, very, very strange stuff. You know, uh, K. Emmanuel, remember when tattoo sleeves and dyed hair and septum rings were rare? Now you see the more chicks have them. Oh man. So CM Punk fired by AEW. This is part two. Tony Khan says that he felt the production staff and himself were in danger. We need specifics. I know that he's not going to give specifics, and it's probably all very privileged information. He's not going to let that stuff out. And besides, there's probably only so much of that stuff you could talk about before they end up getting sued. Because if you say something that is defamation to CM Punk's character, he's going to sue you. He seems like a litigious guy, and that might be his last paycheck from AEW is that he files some kind of lawsuit if they go further than what they said. But I don't buy into people who are calling him a pussy and all this kind of stuff. This guy's never been involved in any conflict. He's a billionaire son. You know, people who are like, oh, Tony Khan's a pussy, he's a wuss, yada yada yada. Like, of course he is, man. He's the son of a billionaire. He ain't never been involved with anything like this before. You know, he's never been involved with the wrestling business to this extent. He's never dealt with talent to this extent. There's so many people in between him and the talent when it comes to soccer and football that he doesn't deal with the talent directly. In wrestling, he was dealing with the talent directly. And therefore, their anger can be directed at him directly. But I don't think that I don't think under any idea that CM Punk was going to attack him, that he was, going to be threatened by CM Punk. I think that CM Punk just got very upset, and Tony Khan is not used to that. And a fight occurred where Tony Khan was sitting there, and he's not used to that. Maybe some stuff was knocked over. Maybe some other people were knocked over. Maybe other people complained and said, this is an unsafe working environment. And that's really all you need to say in order to get a lawsuit or something anyways to claim it's an unsafe working environment. You got plenty of evidence. And, there's no telling. Koshan Ard, who is worse backstage, Shawn Michaels 1997 or CM Punk 2023? I'm going to be honest. Shawn Michaels was probably worse because Shawn was always about Shawn. Shawn was about Shawn's stuff. Punk, I think, was legitimately trying to help the company. I think if you look at what he was doing with Collision, he was legitimately trying to help the company. He was trying to build young talent. He was trying to give Collision a different feel than Dynamite. He was legitimately trying to do something that was for the betterment of the company. But his way was not the way that the company first was created for, by the way, nor the talent that was involved, like the elites and all those guys, wanted anything to do with. So I think that he was legitimately trying to make the show better, while Shawn Michaels was just trying to avoid doing jobs and was pissing people off. Almost sometimes he was pissing people off for fun. But when you look at the amount of heat that Shawn had and the reasons why he had heat, none of that stuff could be seen as a positive for the company overall. CM Punk had heat because he told Jungle Boy to stop being a dumb fuck and don't use real glass. That's a positive for Jungle Boy. He's too stupid to know that, but it's a positive for him to not use real glass in promo segments. When he wants all of these rules about, the agents and all these people have to approve certain things, it's because he doesn't want the show to come across as being repetitive. Him banning people from being backstage was all about trying to create a certain atmosphere at the Collision shows, that was not adversarial, or he felt that people were trying to stab folks in the back or trying to sabotage the show. I get why CM Punk did a lot of the stuff that he did and that he was trying to help people. I wouldn't have gotten that from Shawn at the time, because Shawn was going after people like The Rock, who, when he was Rocky Maivia, who really didn't make any difference to the show, burying Shane Douglas and all these guys. And I think he got Mabel fired, and some of the other stuff that he was doing, pissing off like Bam Bam Bigelow and banging Chris Candido's girlfriend, and just doing stuff that really does not benefit the show at all. Like in hindsight, it was entertaining watching him needle Bret Hart in promos and stuff like that. But at the time, I absolutely say that was probably some bullshit. WG Phil says, I wonder when the Elite ends up on the firing squad. Well, once they have the issue here is they may already be there, but if somebody comes up and gets more over than they are and is a little bit more outspoken, and the Elite now want to try to keep them down, you'll see it. I think FTR and CM Punk was probably the counter revolutionaries in their own revolution at that point. Because these guys were more traditional guys, and they were trying to bring traditionalism to this company, a company that is based off of, we're killing, the Young Bucks mockery, we're killing the business and all this kind of stuff. And it was weird, it was weird to explain that to people. Mo the Killer says John Moxley don't do real glass. He did argue for real barbed wire that one time. Him and Kenny Omega had a barbed wire match, and they supposedly had clipped the ends, which that they ended up getting fined like what they got fined like $10,000 or something like that for getting blood, getting juice, even though it was accidental in Baltimore, I think it was. But Jungle Boy is an idiot. Like it really just boils down to that he's an idiot. And but his idiocy is what the independents are now. I mean, think about this. John Moxley, he bitched and whined that Brock Lesnar didn't want to do any of the stuff that he wanted to do. It's because Brock didn't see any need for it. Brock is like, why do you want to do this, and this? We don't need to do that. And Moxley's like, but it'll be cool, bro. We just need to do this, and this, bro. And Brock's like, no. And that frustrated Moxley because he's like, well, I want to be able to do crazy shit and bleed. And even if it's sugar glass, I want to be able to fall through glass or, barbed wire and stuff. And Brock's like, hell no, I'm not doing any of that crap. And he finds a spot in AEW where he can do all that stuff. And then CM Punk shows up and be like, you know what? Probably not. Probably not a good idea for us to do any of this shit. But Moxley's doing it anyway because who's going to stop him? Punk ain't got no control over Moxley. Moxley's as big a star as Punk is in some respects, not to the same level of overness, but in terms of what he means to AEW, he's just as important. He's the guy who fills in every time CM Punk fucks up. So he's not going to have any stroke over Moxley. So we're in a situation where the guy's trying to bring some kind of traditionalism to a company that's staunchly dedicated to being as PWG and as indie as possible. There's just no way that was going to work out. Humble 85. I am curious to know what TNT will do next in regards to AEW's TV deal, because AEW can't draw new fans to the product. And they have officially pissed off the older fans. Again, I'm glad I did this live stream and didn't just, do a recording, because you guys are really adding a lot to the conversation. Isn't that what Tony Khan said he wanted to do? Tony Khan said he wanted to tap into the lapsed fan. That was his goal. That was his plan, right? And bringing in the lapsed fans, CM Punk coming in was part of that. Now he's fired CM Punk. So now all the lapsed fans who were fans of CM Punk are like, well, I'm back to not watching wrestling again because CM Punk is not going to be on AEW TV. So they pissed off all of those people. They're going to have the Cornettes and all these guys and their fan base attacking. They was already attacking AEW every week, but at least they were saying the CM Punk stuff was good. Now there's not even going to be CM Punk stuff for them to talk about anymore. David Zaslav apparently was a fan of CM Punk. This is, of course, according to CM Punk and according to Tony Khan. You do have to ask the question, what is TNT and TBS, what are they going to be doing? What are they going to think about Tony Khan firing CM Punk. You're going to go to David Zaslav and say, well, the guy was a danger to the talent and everybody else. And they're going to look at you and be like, the one fucking guy on your roster that we liked, you got rid of. And as far as we know, they haven't signed a new contract yet, but we don't know. Timu says, why do these people want to jump through glass and slice their limbs off with chainsaws? What do they get out of it? I don't understand the point. They have the idea that wrestling should look as real as possible, which is true. They should look real. But that means it should look real. Like a movie's supposed to look real too. You know, unless it's like one of these heavily stylized movies like The Matrix or something like that. Wrestling is supposed to look as real as possible. And sometimes they think the only way for it to look as real as possible is to use real gimmicks, real thumbtacks, real glass, real barbed wire. To be quite honest, you also have the sort of aspect that they want to prove that they're tough guys, you know. And there's also an art to doing the hardcore stuff. If you've seen it done well, you know that some people can make it an art form. I've seen Hayabusa do some hardcore matches that are really artistic. You know, Onita, you could see people do that stuff. But typically in the United States, you work pretty often. You shouldn't want to cut yourself up, and it's dumb, and it's especially stupid for your long-term career. I mean, just to dabble into AEW a little bit, Darby Allin has been complaining about his back lately. You know, the same stuff we've been saying. He should stop taking bumps on the ring apron. He apparently jumped off. He did the coffin drop onto a real coffin and all in and jacked up his back. And now they're like, well, my back's kind of screwed up. It's like, you think, you know, you dumb fuck. We've been telling you for 4 years to stop doing this shit. And now it's finally starting to catch up with you. It's dumb. I mean, look at Sabu, man. Everybody knew that Sabu was going to end up in bad shape when he was doing the stuff that he was doing in ECW. Everybody knew, like, this guy's not going to be around very long, you know? And Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay, these guys who constantly talk about how their knees and back and arm, like, yes, you're going to take bumps and stuff like that in wrestling anyway. It just goes with territory. But when you end up with doing unnecessary stuff just to prove that you're tough or just to prove that you're athletic and all this kind of stuff, it doesn't do you any good, you know? All right. D-Mac says, do we get a bunch of softball questions at the scrum, or will folks ask real questions? I'm thinking you'll probably get a real question. You know, when did you decide to fire CM Punk is probably going to be one of the questions, and he'll probably say no comment. We've already put out a comment on this, yada, yada, yada. Are they going to ask the talent about it? It's probably going to be an interesting question. I don't almost guarantee you Tony Khan is going to have to find some way of telling people like MJF not to comment. You know, don't talk about it, because now the guy's not in the company anymore. There's going to be some people who are going to be like, all right, I don't have to work with this guy anymore. I'm going to nuke him. You know, I'm going to go ahead and say how I really feel. And you shouldn't do that, because there's still the threat of lawsuits and all this kind of stuff that might be floating around. But I can guarantee you, you're probably going to get a bunch of softball questions, and anything that is like a legitimate question, like who's on a disciplinary committee, no comment. We can't talk about that. Or it's a secret, you know. we can't tell people. That's what I want to know. Who's on a disciplinary committee? You know, who's on it? Well, I can tell you who has to be on it. Christopher Daniels got to be on it. He's the head of talent relations. He's got to be involved with it in some capacity. So we know at least one person is involved. And if Christopher Daniels is not involved with it, then how could it be a real disciplinary committee? You know, the head of talent relations has to be involved with any talent decisions, because they have to be able to talk to talent about it. You know, so this is getting really ridiculous. All right. So we talked about Tony Khan feeling like his life was in danger. It's ridiculous. The Payback review will be up a little bit later. Then I'll put Collision and All Out together, and that will be up tomorrow. We'll also look into Around the Horn. What does, you know, Meltzer and a bunch of other people think about CM Punk being fired? We'll talk about all that probably Monday. And I'll talk to you guys later.